Hello. In this video, we are going to look at how to create a pre-registration. However, before we go into the procedural details, let's do a little recap of what pre-registration is and why are we doing this in the first place, so that you know how to correctly fill out a pre-registration form. So the pre-registration is basically a research plan that you share on some repository on the internet that not even the author of that research plan can edit anymore. So that's basically a frozen version of a research plan at one point in time. So why is this useful? So we need to make a distinction between two types of research. One of them is exploratory research and the other is confirmatory research. So whenever we have a concrete hypothesis that we want to test, then we are doing confirmatory research. Then we have statistical tests that are testing those concrete hypotheses. If we don't have a concrete hypothesis, or we want to more take a look and explore the data, what the data tells us, and use that to inform future research, then we are doing an exploratory study. So pre-registration is more useful for confirmatory research, and for exploratory research, it is not that impactful, it's not that necessary. But sometimes you would even pre-register an exploratory research study. So a pre-registration is there to minimize the impact of post hoc researcher decisions on the findings of a research study. So what do I mean by post hoc decisions? So let's say that you have completed a research study and you are interested to test the hypothesis whether, for example, an intervention, a therapy has a positive effect on people. So the ways you set up your research analysis, the way you slice and dice your data set, the variables you include in your analysis, the outlier detection methods that you use, the transformation methods you use in your analysis can all influence what you will find in the end. And it turns out that researchers tend to find what they want to find in this process. So these decisions that are made after knowing the data, after seeing the data and seeing the results of these analyses, can have a really high influence on the findings that you will get in the end. And potentially they can bias the outcome of a research study. So what we ideally want to do is to make all the decisions that are possible to make before data collection has even started. And this way, minimizing the number of decisions that the researcher needs to make, ideally even making it so that the researcher doesn't have to make any decisions at all. The plans that the researcher made would allow them to carry out a protocol which will produce the results. So this is what we intend to do with a pre-registration. So in order to minimize the effect of post hoc decisions on the findings, what you need is a very detailed research plan that include every little detail where a researcher needs to make a decision, and that needs to be decided before the data is collected. What the pre-registration does, aside from a research plan, is that it can be shared with other researchers and the members of the public and the stakeholders, so that the researcher can verifiably show that this was really the research plan that the researcher executed in the way that the researcher planned to do that. So the pre-registration brings the research plan one step further by uploading the research plan onto a repository, which we call a study registry most of the times, but it doesn't have to be an official study repository. The important thing is that the uploaded version of this pre-registration needs to be, so to speak, logged away from the researcher in a way that the researcher cannot edit it afterwards. Otherwise, it wouldn't be useful to demonstrate to other people that this was really the plan of the researcher to begin with. So there are some websites which specialize on this to provide a tool for researchers where they can upload their research plan, and then that research plan is frozen and a link is generated where they can share it with others and demonstrate that, yes, this was my research plan and this is my final study, so you can compare my plan to the final study and see whether I deviated from this research plan in any way. Okay, so now that you know what the pre-registration is, you can actually decide whether you want a pre-registration or not. So if you will conduct a confirmatory study, then I would definitely advise you to do a pre-registration, because that way you can show to other researchers that there were no major biasing influences by the researcher after seeing the results or seeing the data of the study. If you want to do an exploratory study, you can still do a pre-registration to lay out the plans for the research study, but pre-registrations for exploratory studies can be less detailed, and more of the plan can be left vague or undecided, because you are not set out to confirm a specific hypothesis. Okay, so now I will show you how to create a pre-registration. Let me share my screen with you. Okay, so what we are going to do now, there are many places where you can do that. There are many study registries out there, and I will show you the one that is most flexible in my opinion. So it affords, where it allows to do pre-registration for most researchers from any kind of discipline. So this is the Open Science Framework, OSF for short. So you can type in osf.io, hit enter, and you will land on OSF's website. So I'm already logged in, but if you don't have an OSF account, you will have to create an OSF account for this. OSF is completely free, and you can create an account and register many studies here. So OSF provides researchers with a space where they can have a web page for each of their research projects. So let's create a new project now. I will title this test project for pre-registration. You can actually select a place for the data to be stored, and if you intend to share data via OSF, I would recommend to choose Germany, Frankfurt, if you are a European researcher, because this might help you with the to be compliant with the GDPR requirements. Okay, but this is not necessary if you only want to do a pre-registration and nothing else. You can leave this at default if this is the case. Okay, I will create this project now. Now a web page is created for my project. I will go to this project, and here is this web page. It is completely blank now. What you can do, and I would recommend that you do this, is to go here in this wiki, and here you can give a basic description of your project. This can be a single line or just a couple of lines, but those, if you want to share this project page with other researchers, it is really helpful for them to get a simple at-a-glance overview of what this project is about. So I will just do it now. Here I will enter if OSF lets me to do that. I will wait a couple of more seconds for OSF to load. Let's hope that this will work. Okay, so I will just enter here that this is a test project to demonstrate how to do pre-registration OSF. Okay, and I will hit save. And then after some thinking, progress bar, we will this will be registered on the page of this project. So now when I go back to the main project page, this description should show up here. Okay, and you can do a lot of stuff here on this project page. You can include data, you can include many different files and components and share it with your fellow researchers. You can add collaborators in the settings so that others can also edit this page and also work with you and upload files. So this is an ideal place for researchers to store their research projects and to collaborate with other researchers. And you can make this public so that the URL can be shared with everyone and they can see what you are doing in your research. But this is not necessary if you want to do just the pre-registration. So now we have created this page. Let's see how to do the pre-registration. You need to find here in this top bar the registrations tab. Click on it. So here in this registrations tab, you will see that there have been no complete registrations so far, and there are no draft registrations, because this is a completely new project. So you need to click here on this new project or new registration button. And here you will get several options that you can choose from, which template you would like to use to do this pre-registration. There are many templates, and if you are doing a kind of classical research study, then I would recommend that you use this OSF pre-registration, so the first option here. If you have a study that is kind of hard to categorize into regular research studies, like not an experimental study or not an interventional study, not a clinical trial, things like that, then you can use this open-ended registration. So if you use this open-ended registration, you will basically be completely free. You will just get a big text box that you can populate with any information that you want. But why I really like this classical option, the OSF pre-registration option, is because it guides you through the whole process, gives you all the major questions that you need to think about when you are doing a pre-registration. So let's see this original option first. Before I go into that, let's look at the other options. So there is a pre-registration template here for qualitative research projects. So you can choose this if you are doing a qualitative study. If you are submitting a research study to a publication format, which is a registered report, where a journal would give an in-principle acceptance to your research as a plan before you gather any data. So a journal would accept your study as a plan and give some kind of pledge to publish this, whatever the results might be. Then you can use this registered report pre-registration format. If you are doing a data blind pre-registration, which basically means that you have already collected data, but you can still you still haven't really analyzed it, haven't really looked at the data in detail. You can still do a pre-registration. It is often called a data blind pre-registration, and you can tell the readers about this with this format, but it's actually also included in the classical OSF pre-registration format. And there are a couple of other templates here that are from other sites, but you can use their templates to do a pre-registration. If you have any preference from these, you can choose these as well. These are great as well. For example, the as predicted one, I like that as well. But let's now just go ahead and use this OSF pre-registration, the classical option. You can click on this create draft button. And here you will have to fill in all of these fields about your study. So you can give a title to this pre-registration, which usually should be the same as your study title. And you can give an abstract about your study, what the study intends to do, basically. Then you can also designate that what should be the type of this pre-registration. This can be left as project. It doesn't really matter that much. If you are doing a separate pre-registration for your analysis and your research protocol, you can designate them by designating some of them as a project and the other as analysis, but this is just for visuals, basically. Okay, so you can choose a license, which is something that most researchers are not really familiar with, but if you intend to share your research plan and analysis plan, analysis code, then others will be able to use that. And so if you are not comfortable with allowing anyone to use whatever you put on the internet here and get them inspired to do a study, copy your research plan, your analysis code, and just do the study maybe even before you, you can specify some forms of license agreements that will specify how how others can use the content that you put up here. I like this CC BY 4 international license, which basically says that others have to cite the original work whenever they use contents from it. And if they modified anything in it, then they need to specify what they modified in this in their version of that work. So I think this is a good license to choose, but please read the details of these different licenses if you intend to use a license. Okay, so here you can choose a discipline and sub-discipline as well for your study. I will not fill out the whole pre-registration form, just show you the some of the tabs so that you get a basic idea of what types of things you will need to fill out. And here you can notice when I press the next that there are some fields that I left uncompleted. So before I submit my pre-registration, I will have to fill in all of the required fields. And this is also good because it doesn't let you miss or skip parts that would be important to think about. So in the next section, you can specify the hypotheses that you intend to test. Then you can share information about your research design, whether this is an experimental study or an observational study, whether this is a review or a meta-analysis. You can talk about blinding, so for example, whether the participants or the researcher or some of the researchers are blind to study conditions, for example, in interventional study, this is useful. Other information about the research design, you can upload data and files. If you already have all this laid out in some external file, then you can just drag and drop it here and share it with others. You don't have to type all of it in by hand. You can talk about the sampling plan. So here you can actually specify whether you already have the data, have collected data, and why do you still intend to do a pre-registration if you already have the data? What makes this still a pre-registration? So you can put some explanations here. If you don't have the data already, or you do have the data, you can still specify the data collection procedure, how you intend to collect the data, how you have collected the data already. You can specify what is the sample size target that you want to reach, and why do you have this sample size target, very importantly. What are the other stopping rules aside from reaching the sample size target, if you have one? you also can specify the variables that you will have. So basically the measured data that you will have in this study. What are the variables that you will manipulate? For example, experimentally manipulated variables like group assignment. If there are two groups, like two treatment groups in your study, this is a manipulated variable, and you also have a list of measured variables. Can add the list of measured variables that you don't manipulate, you just measure them. You can also add information about the research plan and analysis plan. So what are the statistical tests that you intend to use in this study, and what are the data transformations that you will use on the data if it's non-normally distributed, for example, and if that's necessary in your case. What will be the criteria based on which you intend to exclude data from the data set. So this will cover you if you have some outliers, you can demonstrate to other researchers that I have already before the study specified how I will detect outliers and how will I deal with these outliers, or how will I deal with missing data. If I have like two questions that people didn't answer to, how will I deal with this situation? Will I keep this participant in the study, in the analysis, or will I exclude them? Will I input some values there to supplement the data set, and so on? And you can also specify if you have, aside from your confirmatory analyses, so all of these were about the confirmatory analyses, which are about the hypothesis tests, but you can also specify a long list of exploratory analyses that you plan to do. As I said, this is less important to be very detailed, but still it is good to have a more or less complete list of the exploratory analysis that you already foresee that you will do here. And you can add any other information here in this other tab. You can review all of the things that you have entered in this review tab. It's not populated now because I haven't entered a lot of things, just the study title and that it's a project and things like that. But these fields will be populated once you add the information here in these other tabs. And once you have filled out everything that is required, then you can click on this register button. So what will happen then is this pre-registration will be submitted to the OSF staff, who will perform basically a formal check on it. So they will not check your research plan, they will not check whether the analysis plan makes sense or anything like that. They will just check whether you have entered every information that is required for the pre-registration to go online. And this can take a couple of days, actually. So if you have a very specific data collection start date, plan a few days or even a full week before that, so that this check can be completed, and then the OSF staff will give the go-ahead on this, and the pre-registration will be finalized. So what also will happen is that all of the contributors who you have added in your project in OSF will also get a notification about this pre-registration, that it has been submitted, and they have the ability to object to this pre-registration. So if they don't do anything, I think it will just go ahead automatically. but if they see some error in there, or if they don't want to pre-register this just yet, they can object to this and they can halt the pre-registration process, basically. So they have veto power in this case. Okay, so once you are once this process is completed, then you will have a pre-registration. And I will not submit this because I will have to fill a lot of fields to do that, and I don't want to unnecessarily burden the OSF staff with the test project like this, but I will show you how this will look like in another project of mine where I do have a registration. So when you go to the project page on OSF and click on these registrations, you will now see in the registrations tab the pre-registration. And if you click on it, you will see all the information that you have entered here, and also some very important information. What was the date that this was registered? What is the date that this pre-registration draft was created? And the link to the registration. So if you copy this link, then it will also give you some like pre-filled lines for others to cite this pre-registration. So if you want to cite this pre-registration in your own paper, demonstrating that you have pre-registered this protocol, or if others create a study based on this, they can also use these citations. But basically, you can actually copy this link and share it with anyone, and this link will lead people to this pre-registration page, where they can see for themselves that you haven't modified this pre-registration. So there's also an option to modify an already existing pre-registration. You will just create a new registration for this, and the date will show that you have modified the registration, so that everyone will know when the information here was finalized. Okay, so as I mentioned, there are many other places where you can do pre-registration. If you don't want to bother with OSF and creating a project, if you only want a pre-registration, aspredicted.org can also be a good option. So here you can go to aspredicted.org. aspredicted.org, and here you can create a pre-registration. Again, I'm logged in here, but I will log out for now. You will see this page, and you can click on create and simply follow the instructions here. We are already registered, so you need to use the sign in button if you're already registered. But I think if I click here, might be able to sign in. Yes, so get an email here, and I can follow this link to sign me in One thing that you need to do is to provide an academic email address, because it will not accept non-academic email addresses here in as predicted. Okay, so once you have clicked on create or logged in and click on this create, then you can create a pre-registration. Here you can specify the authors and their email addresses and answer these questions here. It is more streamlined than the OSF standard pre-registration form, but it also contains, this one also contains the most important information. So you can use this one as well. Just like the OSF, it provides more flexibility by providing more templates for you. And also you can have a project page for your research project, which later you can use to share data, to share other information, to share your preprint and things like that. Okay, so this concludes the video about how to do a pre-registration. Thank you for watching.